All right. And my screen should still be showing. All right, here we go. So welcome to year 3 to the leadership development. You can call it a seminar, you can call it a course, you can call it sessions. You don't get grades, so you could call it a gathering if you wanted to. There are 2 quotes here that really embody my heart for this course and what I hope will happen as you progress through this space. The first one says that your spark can become a flame and change everything. And the other one is give light and the people will find a way. I believe that your leadership is your light and each one of you carries something that will contribute to the light that's going to lead us to a more equitable and just society. I think that each of you is carrying something precious. And it might look different for everyone, and it's supposed to. It's supposed to be like a mosaic, I think. So I'm grateful to see how your lights grow and evolve. I'm not here to tell you who you're going to become or to prescribe a certain type of leadership to you. You won't hear any of that. But instead, I'm hoping that these discussions and the resources and the activities help you to find your natural leadership style, your natural leadership voice, and that you lead from who you are, not what people expect you to be or what your field says you should be, but that you take those unique gifts and add your education and your experiences, and that you start to make change in your various fields and areas. So that's my hope for you. This is really a course that you could probably do. When I realized there are only 8 sessions, or 9 if you include this one together, we could probably knock it out in 1 week. But we're going to do this over the course of this year. We only meet once a month. Those of you who are getting ready to graduate will meet more than once a month because you have to do the year 4 requirements as well. I know that Atia has shared that information. She is not here tonight because the courses are really somewhat separate, but you have that info. But for most of us, we'll be meeting once a month, Monday and Tuesday. To get us started, I always like to acknowledge our values and community together. You've seen these before. And I also just want to name that the artist that we worked with that initially drew this for us when she was trying to envision our values, she told me that when she met us as a program, she pictured us as people who were helping to shape a current, that we were like the stones in the current. She was saying, you know, when you put stones in a small river like this, that it shapes how things flow. And a ton of stones makes a huge difference over time. And she said, when I met the folks at HPRS and I met some of the scholars, she was like, I just picture you all as just shifting and changing things. And it might feel slow, but that you're actually doing something. And so when she envisioned the values, she kept that same theme in mind. But these are the values that are important to us. These are the values that I hope hold our course together. I believe in them, and I hope that they resonate still with you. I will do my best to live up to them. I know that it's funny because that accountability one can sometimes come off as the hardest one. People are like, well, I want to hold you accountable. I'm like, well, I have to want to be held accountable for this to work well. Please know that my heart is with you and that I am always about seeking truth together. You may not love every concept. I don't love every concept. I was reading an article earlier that I'm still debating on if I'm going to share with you all or not, because I was like, I don't know. I agree with this author. I disagree with this author. I was going back and forth and I was like, oh, I think that's just called discourse. I think that's just called education. You might see the article because I think you all would also critique it, but you would also get something that I think would help sharpen and shape who you are. So, but nonetheless, please know that I am here for dialogue and discourse. I'm here to seek the truth with you. I do not come to you talking about leadership as if I have figured it out. I don't have all the answers. I might have more questions than answers, but I'm here to pursue truth with you and to help name leadership in your story with you. So that is my role, and these values will be present. So with that, I also believe in the idea of shared agreement. I am offering a shared agreement of presence, meaning that I am committed to being here. I get to have you all to myself this year. I'm very excited. I've gotten to be with you each year of the course or of the program. For those of you who will be here a 4th year, you'll see me again next year for a couple of sessions then as well. But this year, I get to talk with you about leadership solo. For the most part, we have a couple of guest speakers coming in, but it'll primarily be me, and I'm very grateful. I've been looking forward to this since I've met you. And I commit to also being on time. And I add grace here because I'm going to ask that we do the same things together, like that you attend on time as best as possible. But guess what? Grace is extended. I know that life happens. So I also commit to ending on time. And I'm going to make a very bold offer and ask that you be willing to, if you're watching this as a recording, or if you're attending in person, that you would attend the entire session. I know I've had sessions where people were like, I have to leave like 45 minutes early. And I'm like, that's like half my session. I only get to see you once every blue moon. So I'm just asking that if possible and whenever possible, as much as possible, that you attend the whole session. That's my bold ask. I did say to the group yesterday, I'm going to say this again. I tend to say this pretty regularly in when I teach other things. If you leave more than 10 minutes early, more than twice, it usually means that's a request to meet. It might mean that this isn't working with your schedule. And again, because I only see you once a month, I'm kind of picky. I'm a little finicky, but I do have a lot of grace. What else do you think is important to agree to as community? I also would like to hear what's important for you and to you. I have a little bit from what was shared yesterday, but I'll show that second. What's important to you or what comes up from you? You can either come off mute or you can put it in the chat.
What about confidentiality?
Oh, Aaliyah, say more. Let me get my pen and I'm gonna also add it. When I send the slides or post the slides, it'll be on there. Go ahead, say more.
So I want there to be a space for us to share our experiences or whatever we have witnessed without fear of it being shared outside the course.
That's real. I think that is a reasonable expectation. And I also do note that we record these and we ask that people do not forward the recordings. I will do my best. So if people ask me, if they say, Jessica, there's something I want to share, but I don't want it recorded, I will pause. You'll see in a few slides, I'm going to share something with you and I'm going to pause. So confidentiality is a wonderful and reasonable ask. Thank you for naming that. And we will add that to the list and I will make sure that this is posted publicly. Thank you, Aaliyah. Anything else? All right, I don't see anything in the chat. I don't see anyone off of mute. I'm going to continue to progress as soon as I find my mouse. So it buys us a little time. There's my mouse. All right. So in terms of the other half of your group, what I heard yesterday was, I think this is Melinda Adams, the first one, grace across all shares, ideas, and presence, right? This idea of just offering grace for whatever is shared. Sometimes in learning, we have to sound stupid in order to learn, if that makes sense. Sometimes I might say the dumbest thing in the world, and I'm like, oh, wait, that doesn't sound right. Let me think about that. But just offering grace across what's being shared, knowing that ideas are often unformed and they're often emerging. I am also an introvert, which means I talk best when I've written it first. And sometimes an idea just isn't fully formed. I've been put on the spot before. Somebody will ask me a question. I'm like, I don't know, I'm thinking through this and talking at the same time, and it might sound stupid, and you know what, that's okay. But just offering grace for the ability to think through ideas and knowing that ideas are always emerging. Someone else said trust, I think this is Jamila here, trust and non-judgment, which I think is really important. It goes back to learning again. And trust also contributes to what Aaliyah was sharing, right? I'm trusting my community enough to hold my story in confidence, right? And then assuming positive intent. I can imagine in a program this large that everyone doesn't see every issue the exact same way. We might have the same heart and the same goal, but our pathways to get there might be different. And the way we have an understanding of a topic or our experiences might be different. And sometimes there can be a bit of a rub, but in this community, to assume positive intent first, I think is always important. So that goes back to grace. So I hear grace and trust and confidentiality as overarching themes. If anyone has anything else, you can always email me or you can drop it in the chat. And after this session, we only have, again, 8 sessions together. It's going to go really fast. Watch. All right, you'll notice the next slide says something like standard opening slide, which is kind of funny. So this year, y'all, I don't have a TA. It's just Jessica. I am making it work. I've had a TA the last 2 times I did this, but what I would have loved is if I had had someone in the 4th year of the program who was able to work with us this year. So next year, I'm hoping to have someone from cohort 4 who will be willing to TA with cohort 5, right? So we'll put out a call for that. I'm just putting that out there right now. But nonetheless, this year it's just me. So I need a little bit of extra grace if I seem a little scattered, or I'm managing 3 screens so I can stay sane. But you'll see the slide each time, and it's partially for me to stay on task and to stay on track. I'm visual, I'm also audio, but I need to have my list. So we will always, like I said, we'll start with announcements and celebrations. If anybody has any song requests, let me know. I'm happy to play that at the opening as we're thinking about what we're celebrating. I have realized that I often need help, and I asked this yesterday and it worked out really well. So I'm gonna ask it today. Is there anyone that would be willing to be my chat monitor / recording reminder person in class today?
I can do it today, Jessica.
Thank you, Mikhail. I appreciate you. Thank you. It's helpful. I should be okay, but it's always helpful to ask for a backup. You never know. So if you got me, you got me, friend.
I got you.
Thank you. And then I want to make sure I didn't see any names that weren't listed. I used to see all the time phone numbers, but I think Zoom is also updated since I taught this course 2 years ago. So we should be good. So that I don't have to worry about that. All right, so our goals, let's actually get to the stuff. Our goals for tonight. So we'll do a brief welcome and intro. We'll do a brief course overview. So I am not going to go over the syllabus line by line. The syllabus is posted in multiple places, and ideally in your one-on-one meetings with him and with me or with Atia, you're talking through the syllabus, but it should be pretty clear, pretty straightforward. So I will go over, however, the assignments, because my experience is that people, it's just more appreciated if I clarify, tell me what this means, tell me what you want, what are you looking for? So we will go over the assignments together. We will start with a leadership discussion close to the end. It won't be anything too difficult, too deep to process. We're just starting somewhere, but we'll spend the bulk of the time just kind of getting up off the ground and thinking about the course, like why are we even here? And I want to make sure to set you up with a good vision for what's coming up. So before we get there though, let me, I'm gonna pause in a minute, but I wanted to do a little more of an introduction because it dawned on me as I was putting this together that I should share a little bit more about me, because I've gotten to meet you. I got to meet many of you in person this summer. I've also gotten to meet you in year 1 and year 2, but mostly through talking about values and strengths. And I was like, oh, everything that I'm asking you all to do, I should be willing to do as well. And part of that is being vulnerable and sharing part of your story, right? Because you lead through your experiences and you lead through your story. So because my family has not given me permission to record, I'm going to pause my recording. Give me 1 second. Recording. There we go. So next slide. So last thing I'll say about Jessica that is probably recorded now is that when I thought about my story from besides pictures, I thought about all the different titles and identities that I hold or have held at some point, right? Because I'm still a daughter, a sister, an aunt, a partner. It will always be true that I was like one of the first people to graduate my family with an advanced degree. That part will never change. I'm just not currently enrolled in school, right? But I don't hold any of some of these professional titles anymore. And some of them I held for, like I said, I had 4 titles at once, but that one at the bottom, the Director of Scholar and Alumni Leadership Development, that is by far my favorite. And I can say that when I listed these out, it was amazing what leadership stories started to come back to me. And some of the lessons that I've learned, I failed, right? I want to make sure I'm very clear here. I have not had the straight line of like, this is what I did. And then I was able to find the job that I absolutely love. I have had a zigzag. I have failed. I have experienced racism. I have experienced harassment. I've been depressed. I've wanted to quit. I've hit the bottom, but I've also learned from the valleys. I've learned in the valleys. I think leadership is also what happens when you climb out of the valley. So I just want to encourage you that this is not a linear picture that you're seeing here. What you're seeing is many years of zigzags and lots of emotions, I'm sure, but lots of growth. And I hope that when you get a chance that you think through your story and think about the lessons that you've learned through the various titles and identities that you hold as well. So that's a little bit about me. And I wanted you also mostly to know that there's a human being that's leading this course. There's no robot, there's no magical textbook and a bunch of dictionary definitions. There's a human being who is here to interact with you dynamically and to just meet you exactly where you are. So then, all right, Jessica, enough about you. Tell me more about this course. So I shared this, I think, last year with you all when we finally pinned our definition of leadership. Secret, or maybe not a secret, open secret. There is no one definition of leadership. Scholars don't agree. There just isn't one. And leadership is not new. It didn't start with the Industrial Revolution and this idea of, you know, how to make a better profit. And so how do you get workers to be more productive and theories about that. Leadership has been around for centuries. Indigenous leadership existed long before we got here, or they got here rather, right? Leadership exists culturally. It's ancient. It is not new. And so it's important in thinking about leadership, though, because it doesn't have one shared definition, that you have to define it. You have to find a language for it. And I remember asking Keisha, I said, Keisha, what's our definition of leadership? And she said, I think that we need to draft one so that people don't assume anything based on what's already written. So this is our shared definition that we're working with, and we realize it's not an end all be all, it's just what applies to our community. So ideally, what you'll see here is that partnerships, process of change, collaboration, power, and tasks, for the most part, our leadership definition is extremely relational. It's extremely relational. If there are no tasks, however, the word at the bottom, and I still have my list a little bit, it's hard to say that word. If there are no tasks, what happens is that people are relating, but nothing's changing, right? But then you'll have some people who believe that leadership is only task oriented, but they will step over the people or step on the people in the name of power in order to get it done, and they will ignore the relational aspect. And so in HPRS, we're really trying to balance both. Are there any questions about our definition of leadership or even any challenges? I want to pause for a minute. All right, I'm not seeing or hearing anything. You can always interrupt me. In the leadership, in the folder that I'll share in a bit, I've included leadership readings. One of those is one about self-expansion theory. And it's actually somewhat hard for me to wrap my head around, but I will say this in short. The one thing that really struck me from that article is essentially this. It boils down to this, that each one of us is an event that happens to someone else, whether we realize it or not. And that our leadership is impacted by our relationships with those that we're working with. And we also are someone who impacts others. It's in and out. It's internal and external. And so it's important to think about, if I am an event that happens to other people, I wonder how they experience my leadership, right? And it's worth asking yourself, you know, if I see myself leading, or when I see myself leading, how do I want people to experience me? How do I hope that they'll experience me? What's their actual reality? So that's just something to keep in mind, but I'll get to that folder in a minute. You've seen this before as well. So remember, there is no one type of leader. There is no prototype. That you all are leaders as collaborators, champions, abolitionists. You all are creative, you're uplifting, you are protectors, you're fierce fighters, you're mobilizers, you're scientists, you're change agents and transformers. Many of you have a family-oriented style of leadership, meaning that you draw people into community with you. And family isn't always about the traditional means of family, but family is about the people that I think you come home to. And so you have this way of creating family around you and leading with others and not over. So we have a really diverse group of leadership styles here and leaders. So just keep in mind that we honor your differences, we celebrate the diversity, and I think it really is like a mosaic. All right, so what holds this course together? So ideally, what should happen is that at some point in your story, and maybe this is past HPRS, let me list these concepts a little bit and then go there, that you are, I could see you in years, or maybe some of you starting very soon because some of you are leaving us sooner than others, that you're going to be working to cultivate a culture of health in your community through your field and in your profession. And many of you are actually already doing that right now. You're not just writing a dissertation, meaning that you're sitting in a corner and nothing else is happening. You are writing, you're researching, you're networking, you're working, you're forming groups, you're Danae, I'm thinking about you and the fellowship you just described. You are out there already shaping the current that I was talking about earlier. You are already actively doing this. And so that is the ultimate goal. That's where we are headed toward. That's what we hope for you. And to get there, that means we have to understand some of what it means to lead together, right? This is a program where we lead together. Power is not over, it's power with. And so there are interpersonal and professional relationships and collaborations and partnerships, and of course, community. And community is at the center of policy as well. And then there's leading for equity. So applying those same principles, so taking your equity lens and you're putting that with your leading together, and that's leading you to the impact. And underneath that, we will talk about, from all my people that are my analysts, and they're like, Jessica, show me the data. We will look at our research articles and we'll think about systems thinking. We'll analyze some leadership styles together. There are a ton of them, by the way. And so we will also think about considering and challenging best practices. I have that in quotes there. Melissa, shout out to your hymn. I did find Melissa's hymn recommended a really hard to find book. I was able to get it through an interlibrary loan. I am working on a book list. Don't worry, I will put it in our folder. But nonetheless, there was something I was reading in that particular text about wise practices, thinking about indigenous ways of leading. And instead of best practices, what was lifted up there was wise practice. And who's to say what is best? Best is very hierarchical. Best is about somebody being, if somebody's best, somebody has to be worse. And wisdom is a much broader and a much, I think it's much more adaptive, because what might be best in one scenario may not be wise in another. And so I would really love to think about, instead of worrying about best practices, helping you all to think about what wise practices are. And I just want to say I really appreciated that perspective. And Melissa, I also want to say, as I'm reading that book, I read it as someone who is very humbled, but also recognizing I'm a cultural outsider. And so I read it as a guest, not to take from it, but to sit with it and ask, what are you asking of me? And how are you challenging me? So I'm grateful for that text, but I did get it. And then there is leading from within. And this is really the heart of the course. So fostering that intrapersonal relationship, the relationship with yourself. There's a person that is doing the leading. So I've been talking with you about your values and your strengths and your identities, and we're going to continue to build on that in this course. So we will never get so task-oriented and equity-oriented that we forget about the people at the center and the heart of equity. So here are the components of the leadership course. We have the leadership sessions once per month. And then you have coaching once a month or leadership interviews. I'm going to talk about each one of these in a moment, because coaching this year is a little bit different. And then we have something that I'm calling a living textbook. This is completely optional, but for those of you who are thinkers and writers, remember I said earlier that for me to process or for me to speak well, I often have to write it first. I learn from my own lessons when I write them out. I want to share with you, give me 5 seconds. Just an opportunity for you as we're going throughout this year together to be able to just record your lessons learned, because you might be able to do what I was doing when I was looking at those job titles that I listed. And you might be able to look back through some of your stories, and some leadership lessons will start to emerge. So if we're talking about conflict, you might find, you know what, I remember when I had X, Y, and Z conflict with my advisor. This is how I worked through it. This is how I didn't work through it. Either way. But this is what I learned, and this is what I would like my future self to learn. And my goal with this idea of living textbook reflections is I think that your experiences are powerful, but they're often unprocessed because we're living through them, if that makes sense. You're trying to get to the next milestone. So I wanted to give you an opportunity in the course to take some time to reflect. And when it's time for you to graduate, so for those that are graduating this year, I would finish yours this year. And then those that are graduating next year, you would get yours next year. I would love to present your lessons back to you in some way, shape, or form. I haven't figured out what my formatting is going to be. Usually something creative happens, but I want to offer that back to you so that you take your own examples and experiences and your lessons learned with you, because I think that is going to be really important, especially as you move into your future. So this, again, completely optional. You got a lot going on, but for the introverts in our group, for those that love to write, and also these are not shared, so these would not be posted for us to process or for the class to talk about or anything like that. You also would get a copy back of whatever you submit. But I just want to offer an opportunity for you to think about your own living textbook. How can you offer wisdom to your future self? Because you have some. You have a lot, actually. And then, let me keep going here. And then last but not least, there are assignments for the course. They're both individual and there is one that is collaborative. So that's really the heart of the course. That's the whole course right there. All right, so let's talk through the assignments. And I'm looking at the time. We will end on at 5:30 as promised. We're doing okay. So in other words, what are you asking me to do, Jessica, and by when and why, right? I'm very busy, don't waste my time. All right, here we go. Let me break down the assignments. The course readings are really a repository, and they are all found in a Google folder. Right now, I only have October and November, and they'll probably be edited for November, to be honest, but October should be there. I'm gonna put this shared link here. There is the shared drive folder for the course. This is also linked inside the portal as well. I like to say we paid for our Google account, so I use the whole suite. I use it as much as possible because it keeps me organized, and especially not having a TA, I need to think of a way that I can find everything. So there you should see readings. You should see a folder with all the assignments that I'm about to talk about. There should be even a page that has like the links for all of these as well. You should not be lost. Everything that you need in some way, shape, or form should be found in that folder. So you'll see that the course readings are there. Mikhail, can I call on you for a second? Can you confirm that I'm not absolutely crazy and that that link is correct and that the stuff is there?
Yep, I'm clicking on the link. It's correct.
All right.
And things are there.
All right, thank you, appreciate you.
You're welcome.
All right, so we do have our shared folder. So the course readings are what I will post them. I have a ton of readings. I haven't put half of the stuff that I probably have stored in my world. Input is one of my strengths and I collect a lot of readings, but I do have a few there for you. They're only there for your own knowledge, like a repository. I actually just had an alum email me not too long ago and say, hey, I remember such and such article from last summer or 2 years ago. I'm getting ready to start teaching. Can I have a copy? Can I use a copy? I'm like, well, it's not mine. Of course you can. Here are the articles that we use, so on and so forth. So hopefully the articles are helpful. They're interesting, but they're not required homework by any means. Also, you'll notice that there is a folder where you'll be able to add your own readings. Some of you might say, oh, this topic is familiar. There's something I think this community absolutely should read. So you're welcome to also add readings as well. This is a community effort. If you miss a session, there's a reflections form that's also linked in the folder. And it'll be 2 weeks after the missed session, or it'll be 2 weeks after I actually send the email to remind you, because this week is Fall Institute, so I'll probably get to that a little bit later, but nonetheless, it's due. I'll give a deadline, but it'll usually be 2 weeks or more. If you fall behind, just let me know. And then the leadership coaching or leadership interviews, we'll get to that in a second. Then there's a leadership and professional values worksheet. So you'll see in there that there is, this is one of the only things that will be downloaded, and then you're going to upload it to the portal to turn it back in. But we're going to add another layer to your values. So now I'm going to ask you to think about your principles. How do you scan an environment to think about if this environment resonates with your values or not? What questions might you want to ask? People who are getting ready to start looking for opportunities or go on interviews, I've had alumni say that this has actually been really helpful for them. It's helped them to frame their questions during their interviews so they can see if an opportunity actually fits them. You should be interviewing opportunities as much as they interview you. So I will talk more about it in November when we get to the next topic, which is about communicating your narrative. But I just want to let you know that that worksheet is there. So that's one assignment. And then there's a leadership plan. And this is where you'll lay out your vision and your philosophy. You'll also set some goals for yourself. The plan itself is not due until June 30th if you are graduating from HPRS at Summer Institute of next year. If you are going to be here for the 4th year, the plan is not due until your 4th year. And I put December 2023. You can always ask for an extension. I like to tell people it's really due before you finish the program. It's kind of like the culminating self-reflection moment for yourself. So it makes the most sense to do when you're further along in your program, but we offer it here because I also talk about it in the leadership course. So I just want to let you know that you have plenty of time. It's something else that you would download and then upload to the portal, but there is nothing major that is due immediately right now. And then the policy and systems change leadership vision group project. Let me switch screens because I can lay that out. So I haven't met with everyone yet, so I don't think I've talked about this with everyone. During Summer Institute, I don't know if people remember, but Justin Morgan asked a question of one of our guest speakers about what system they would change. You know, America is essentially, how do you put it? America is essentially a failed experiment. I think we can all agree is what he said. And there are systems that need to be abolished or reformed, something to that extent. Where would you start is what he asked. I don't think the question was asked or answered rather fully. And it stuck out to me and I was like, that is a really powerful question. I love good questions. I also thought to myself, I remember sitting there taking notes and I was like, I think this is why HPRS exists, to answer this question as a community. And so as I started drafting, I said, I think that this is a project. I think this is an opportunity for scholars to come together across disciplines who are interested in the same areas or meaning the same systems and to start to pitch a vision. And maybe they can think big and maybe they'll challenge some folks. And I've been thinking about the audience. I told Keisha and I worked on this together to think about what should go into this. And I asked her, I said, is it possible to have more than just us available to be in this audience? It's great to present to us, but I think that there's something bigger here. And she said, I think we should think widely about the audience. So we're working on that part, but I also want to offer back to you as scholars, as you're working on this and momentum picks up, because right now it's just a seed. But when you start to see a vision, when you start to work together, I'm hoping that there will be people that you would like to invite to participate, probably virtually, because it would be, you know, by Zoom or whatnot. But is there anyone that you'll be thinking about that you think should attend this type of presentation? So you have some time, but I just want to put that out there right now and to let you know that I think that there's an opportunity here and there's an opportunity for you to really challenge the status quo, but to also invite people to think about the future. You never know what opportunities could arise from something like this. And I think it should be an interesting project, but this is not due until Summer Institute. And there is a form, you'll see this on the assignments list. There is a areas of interest form that is due in November. That is the form I'm going to ask you to complete. And it's from those forms that will start to group people together. So you have some time. I'll remind you next month as well. But as soon as we have those, we'll start putting groups together and then we'll walk through this slowly. This is not something I recommend that people wait till June and try to toss together by July, but I'll talk a little bit about the different pieces over the coming months. This is something that'll be also relatively new. We haven't actually done this in HPRS in this way before, so I'm looking forward to seeing what you all come up with. But are there any questions on this assignment or any of the assignments? All right, we're looking good. All right, so let's talk about coaching really quickly. So year 3 leadership coaching, you recognize these folks, or you might recognize them. They were at these are the coaches that were able to attend Summer Institute. I don't know if any are on tonight. I don't have my list fully up in front of me, but I'm grateful to you if you are here. So let me take one step back for a minute. So you all have what I like to call a village of supporters. You have a home institution mentor. You have a strengths and leadership coach. You don't have an alumni community pillar. I'm sorry, you actually don't. That was, it started with cohort 5. For those of you that are graduating this year, you'll have the opportunity to be an alumni community pillar if you would like. It's an optional thing where we match first year scholars with alumni. They have one alumni person that they're in contact with for the entire first year. So that's something that we started with cohort 5 though, but nonetheless, each of you will have the opportunity to also become ACPs, as I call them. And then you also have career coaches. What I think is kind of odd about this list is that from a higher education standpoint, your strengths and leadership coach doesn't really fit into higher education. It's not something that's very common in academia. You might have some career counselors at your schools who might do some of this, but in general, people are not assigned a strengths and leadership coach for 2 or 3 years in their doctoral programs. It's not built into higher education. And so relating to a coach is a bit of a stretch, I find, from an academic standpoint, because there just isn't another relationship to compare it to. It's very different. I've said before, they're not your psychologist. They're not quite a mentor, but they are a friend, but they're not a friend, if that makes sense. And I see that Jana is here. Hi, Jana, thank you for being here. So knowing that our strengths and leadership coaches don't fit into, I think, what the academic world looks like. Having alumni like a peer mentor, that's pretty common in higher ed. Talking to a career mentor, that's pretty common. Your home institution mentor is typically your advisor or someone else in higher ed. That's not even uncommon either, but I do think coaching is uncommon, and as such, it's a bit of a stretch, and it takes some thinking about how to best engage and utilize this relationship, because your time with your coach will come to an end. If you're graduating this year, it'll come to an end this year. If you're graduating next year, it'll come to an end next year, but next year will be completely optional for those that are in the 4th year. So in year 2, coaching was mandatory, right? You were introduced to your strengths coach. You were introduced to the idea of coaching, and ideally your strengths reports were the center of the coaching relationship. You really thought about, what do these words mean? How do I embody them? How do I not agree with them? What do they look like, right? This year, coaching is still mandatory, or the leadership interview, but if you opt into coaching, it's mandatory to complete 8 sessions. June is optional for those that are like, oh, I love working with my coach at like in that summer session. June is optional. This year, though, instead of being guided by your strengths reports, the coaching session is really guided by you. In coaching, the client sets the agenda. It is really the client that comes to the coach. I also coach when I'm not in HPRS. I have clients that are not connected to Hopkins. And so what happens is when we meet, they show up and they have an agenda of this is what I would like to work on, Jessica. This is what I would like to learn. This is what I would like to explore. And my role is to provide that safe, guided exploration to help the person unlock what is already within. I am not there to tell them what to do. And I can tell you, I've had clients where I'm thinking in my head, I probably wouldn't do it that way, right? That is not relevant for the coaching conversation. I just listen, I nod, and I say, tell me a little bit about your decision. What values are important to you in that decision? And we work through it, and they decide what they want to do. It matters not if I agreed with the decision or not, and it's not relevant at all. But in coaching, it's about you and it's about your agenda. So this year, I am challenging you all to set the agenda. And you're going to find that in the folder, the shared folder, there is, under assignments, I believe, there's a coaching folder. In there is a coaching guide. And in that guide, you're going to see, which you've seen some of it before, but I've also included almost 30 questions or prompts that you can use to think about what you want to get out of your coaching sessions. I also have included this year what are called touchstones, which the coaches from the Center for Courage and Renewal, we have several of them. That's where they've been trained. This is a common document that they use, and it's been adapted for HPRS, so it's been interpreted through our lens. I encourage you this year, every person, including scholars that I coach, that everybody start with the coaching touchstones. I think that they embody what we hope would happen in the coaching space. I think they also contribute to that idea of safety. Going back to what Aaliyah was saying earlier about confidentiality, I think that that document could be a really good starting point. And even if you looked at it last year with your coach, this document wasn't like this for our group. I think every person should start there. I'm highly, strongly recommending that everyone start there. And for those that might not have had an amazing experience with their coach, because coaching varies by person, this could be a great place to start over. So I just want to put that out there, but the resources are there. But we're really leaning on you as clients this year, and it's almost like a leadership function as well. The agenda is set by you. It's not set by us. Now, next year, coaching will be completely optional. You might not do any coaching at all. You might say, I don't have time, or it's not a fit for me. There won't be any reflections. It's the coaching will be there as a resource for you, but it'll be optional, and you'll have 9 sessions before you graduate. Any questions about this, since this is a little bit of a change? All right, this is my group with no questions. All right. So I actually already went through this slide, so I won't linger here too long. I already said it, but I will also highlight, if you need topics to talk about, the book of beautiful questions that you received, I think a couple summers ago, is also really helpful for topics. So picking any of those questions, because you don't have to read that book sequentially, you can pick any section of that book and reflect on it. And that could make a great discussion as well. So you also have the course topics. You could think about any of your living textbook reflections. If there are any leadership experiences you'd like to dissect and think about who you're becoming, who you were, and so forth, do that as well. So there you go. Now, for those of you that would like to do leadership interviews, so I'm going to say this, for people who were already doing reflections last year, so you weren't meeting with a coach, but you were doing reflections, you're automatically opted into leadership interviews unless you contacted me and said, oh, I want to switch. If you contacted me, then we switched you. But for the most part, I've made a statement in the email we sent earlier in September that if you were doing reflections, we will automatically send you the interview form. I haven't sent an email to get that started, but the interview form is in the folder. But I'm going to send a notice as well, because I realize everyone also is not here tonight. So leadership interviews are due at the end of each month. You're just going to submit the form. On the form are actual prompts as well. There are questions included. I ask that you ask a couple of those and then also use your own. What's most important for this process here is what you're learning about leadership from someone else's story. That's really what's important. People have asked me, well, Jessica, who counts as a leader? And I say, well, you get to decide. I don't have a list of titles. They don't have to be a certain type of person. Who is a leader? Who do you see as a leader, and who would you like to learn from? Whom would you like to interview? I've had some people say to me, this actually might be helpful for me as I'm transitioning into thinking about postdocs. I'm actually starting to ask some of these questions of potential postdoc advisors and whatnot. So I would like to do the leadership interviews as a way of thinking about my future as well. If it's a twofer, I love a good twofer. So if you would like to opt into leadership interviews, the deadline passed, but I realized we hadn't had class yet. That was just my first call. I've told people, let me know by this Friday in writing. That way I can update all of the coaches at one time. So if you would like to switch from coaching to leadership interviews, let me know. If you are automatically opted into leadership interviews, but would like to opt into coaching, let me know. So everyone has until this Friday to let me know. Any questions? Probably not statistically, have it.
I actually have a question.
I knew that was gonna happen.
My question just is to confirm that this is only if you weren't doing coaching, right? So like if you were doing coaching, it's not assumed that you're not doing coaching.
Right,
So you
right.
don't,
If you
okay,
were doing coaching, you're gonna continue coaching. You can switch, but we assumed it's just continuation. Nothing has moved. You had to
okay,
write me to move something.
correct. Okay, cool.
So you're good. Yep. Anybody else before I make any more assumptions and somebody raised their hand, and the one time I thought I was gonna be right. Aaliyah felt me. All right. All right. I think we're good on the coaching and the leadership interviews. Now, 509, we landed exactly at the same spot yesterday. Come on, Jessica, with the list. You got this. What does leadership mean in your field / discipline? Let's do a discussion. Let's do a group exercise together. Give me 1 second. All right, last shared sheet of the night. And I didn't even cuss when I said that. I was worried it was gonna come out funny. So if you click on this sheet, you should be able to edit it. I'm gonna stop sharing. I want you to think about, and there is one more slide after this that is an audible note to self. There is another slide that I do want to talk with you all about that I think might be helpful for many of you. So I'll make sure to leave time for that. So what does leadership mean in my field? Now, yesterday when I presented this and I just asked, I said, we're just noting this. This is just a starting point. We are not probably, this is Jessica. We are going to come back to this over time and we're going to add more prompts. Someone said, do you mean, what do I think it should mean or what it actually means? And I said, only doctoral people would ask me like the difference. Interpret the question as you would like. And if you would like to say that it's aspirational, this is what I aspirationally think it should mean. You can clarify it as you need to, but you can't sound stupid. You can't get it wrong. But I encourage everyone to participate. You're not being graded on it, of course. This is more for community and sharing, and there will be a purpose, but this is just a starting point. So what do you think leadership means in your field? And then the next column is what skills does a leader in your field need to be successful? Again, what do you think? What do you think? Not what they tell you should think. What do you think someone needs in your field to be successful? So I'm going to be on mute for a few minutes to let people fill this in and drink some pineapple juice. All right, this is a wonderful list here. And when I actually get the chance to read slowly, I might even sort it, make a copy and sort it a bit to see if there are any commonalities when you link some of the fields together. I think that's really cool. All right. So I'm seeing, scroll up. Aaliyah, I'm laughing at yours. Popularity is what I saw first. Looked like it was there for a minute. And that's legitimate, that in higher education, popularity is really important in terms of publishing. So you're not wrong. It's an important value. Popularity and strong writing skills and confidence, yeah. I see Tasha, in terms of, I'm looking at the skills column, empathy, humility, recognizing your own expertise without bulldozing others. Ooh. Tasha, can I call on you for a minute? You won't have to talk long.
Sure.
Can you say more? Can you tell us? I mean, how is this possible, do you think?
I draw on that from my clinical experience and working as a therapist, and always working to balance the fact that I'm in the room in a position of authority by way of training, by way of power differentials, but that I don't have all of the answers. Many of those answers lie with my clients and within themselves. And so it's a balancing act between embracing some of the authority that you have without disempowering other people.
I like that. Balancing authority without disempowering.
Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I wanted to say, who teaches that? Is there a class that teaches that?
Practice and supervision.
Right, there you go. There you go. I'm scrolling. I see Jenna. Hey, Jenna. Leadership in clinical psychology is often defined by leading collaborative research teams. Conducting innovative research. It should also mean creating non-hierarchical spaces. Yeah, I think that there's something about this flattening the hierarchy that is going to be consistent here. Is there anyone, because I don't know that I can read fast enough, is there anyone who, for them, leadership in their field is actually the opposite, where hierarchy is required to be successful? Does anybody have something that's quite different? And maybe not in our particular group. I'm trying to think of a field where that may be the case. Because I realize that life has many, you have one on one end, something on the other end, and that life often we live in the middle. So there might be spaces where a hierarchy could be useful, though I think that we've seen hierarchy and power dominance used in a way that that has not been useful. It's been used in the opposite way of what Tasha described. So might be harder to think about. I see Melinda. So Melinda up here Melinda was yesterday as well. Leadership is about everyone succeeding.
Jessica, I was gonna say something to your question.
Yeah. Hey, Melissa.
Hi. I didn't write about hierarchy in sociology, but I did write about individualism, and I think it could be kind of the same in some ways. And I think there's, of course, a spectrum in sociology as well, but my experience and just perspective of how I've seen the field and been introduced to it and all of that stuff is very much like, look at me and all the things I did by myself, and I have come and risen to success in these ways that have been solo and solely determined by me and myself. And so that has been sort of a disorienting way that it's been presented, that, like I said, it's not necessarily hierarchical, but I think it could be construed as that. So anyway, that's what I would offer for now, I think.
Thank you for sharing that. I think you're absolutely right. Anytime someone is esteemed as an individual because they have a lot of something, means that people who don't have a lot of something are not esteemed. And that creates the same frame as a hierarchy. It's just, it might not have a title to it, but I think you're absolutely right. It means you have to have a lot of something to be esteemed. So that's fascinating to me. That would be values challenging, I also think. That would be values challenging.
That's also been my experience studying sociology at Davis. I would say in general, like there is a lot of hierarchy and it's more implicit.
Mhm.
And in general, I would say that like academia is not a place of love and compassion. It's not very warm at all.
That's real. That's real. Thank you. Thank you, Aaliyah. That's real. I think at the heart of leadership, so education comes from educare. I think that's Latin. I might be butchering it. I didn't study Latin, but it actually means to lead forth. You cannot lead forth without relationship. And so I'm wondering if higher education, especially just in our country overall, is missing something because we're not leading forth, because we're not relating to students. Students are not consumers. That's a huge mentality in higher ed, that students are our consumers. They're not consumers. These are not products. What are we're talking about products now? Oh, I'm having a hard time. So students are buying a product. Education is not a product, a good to be consumed. Oh, don't get me started. Yes, I think there is, Elliot. I don't think you are wrong, Professor. I think that there is something there. As a professor, I was gonna say, did you want to put it in the chat? I don't, it's not coming to me off the top of my head. But nonetheless, all of these, what leadership means in my field. What does leadership mean in my field? So I see a common theme just at a quick glance. I see a lot of publication. I do see a lot of relationships still. Maybe there's a contrast there between the relationship and what's the output, right? There's what I put out that makes me valuable, but there are also the relationships that help to contribute to my success. And then I do, who is this that has code switching? It's Corey. Corey, is there anything you want to share? I know you're like, well, no, Jessica, I wrote it there, but I'm calling on you anyway.
Yeah, sorry. I don't want to expound too much upon it, but I
It's
think
okay.
just, you know, we all traverse so many different spaces, right? And especially when we're trying to translate research into policy, right? Jumps to mind. And when I'm like trying to talk about my research to family, right? Or when I'm talking about my research to someone I meet in the hot tub, right? Up on my roof, like there's this like, I've just had to code switch a lot more lately. And so I think that's kind of been at the forefront of my mind, but I think it's something that we're probably all pretty adept at. You know, considering we're all at this point, and something that again have to do quite often.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you for you so wrong. He's in the hot tub. You was talking about research in the hot tub? Never mind.
I know it's horrible.
I ain't mad at you. I ain't mad. But no, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for letting me call on you too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is real. This is a real experience. Let me share a slide. Thank you all for contributing. And as I said, your names are next to this so that I will probably lock the sheet so I don't accidentally move something too when I'm done with this for tonight. But I want to go back and then we're going to wrap up. Give me 5 seconds. So this sounds like it's a random tangent, but it's not. It's going to come back to what we were just talking about in a moment. I wanted to share this slide very quickly. How am I doing on time? I got exactly 5 minutes. Let me pull all of these up for you. And I told your peers yesterday, I said, please take a snapshot if you need to, but I want you to think about leadership and what your capacity is to lead, given what might be the expectations of your field as you understand it, based on what you shared in that spreadsheet, right? And so if you think about leadership and stress and the ability to connect well, to relate well, to bring about a culture of change, to move or shift anything, if pressure is up and capacity is down, you might find that you're overwhelmed. And some of you might relate to this where you are just in your story in general. If you don't have enough capacity and enough resources, the pressure it'll get to you. It'll make it really hard for you to lead. If pressure is down and your capacity is up, this could be positive or it may not be so positive. So I'm thinking about people who will probably get ready to do their defense over the next couple of weeks. After that, some of the pressure will be off. And so for you, pressure will go down and your capacity will increase greatly because you'll be like, finally, something is off my plate. For you, you might find yourself content. You need to get that pressure off of you. It's been riding on your shoulder for a while. So it'll feel good to unload that. For people who stay in this place though, without any pressure or a bit of challenge, they might find that they are bored, right? Then you have when your pressure is up and your capacity is also up, you're engaged. For some people, they might call this flow. This might be the place where you feel like you are really in the zone. Like I have everything that I need. I have the energy. Something's pushing against me. I got to meet this goal, but I also feel like I know I can run toward the goal. And then if pressure is down and you are completely out of capacity, you might find yourself on autopilot where you're just going through the motions and you're just trying to get through. Throughout your days or throughout your weeks, I encourage you to see if you can find where you are in this list. See if you can identify where you are and what contributes to your fluctuations. And I say all this because in our course, my hope is that we are helping you to increase your capacity because your pressure may or may not change. If what you have on that sheet is true, and those are your experiences, thinking about the code switching, thinking about the difficulty of working through hierarchical spaces. Some of you described a leadership that is beautiful and aspirational. Either way, you are going to need the capacity in order to lead well. And I would even argue, I wonder if some of our experiences in academia with difficult leadership is that most of the people that we are either working with or for, and I can say this is not the case, I'm working at HPRS, but just academia in general, is that people are either overwhelmed or bored or on autopilot. And so that's the type of leadership that they show up with. And so if everybody shows up that way, it ends up looking like, well, the field of X, Y, and Z, that must be how people lead. But really what's happening is that people don't have enough capacity or they're not really being challenged to grow. I don't know. I don't have an answer. It's just a question. But I want you to think about your own capacity this week and think about where you need to say yeses, where you need to say nos. I remember talking with you all about this early on in the program, but I want to bring it up here as you also progress through your degree programs. Now that you're in year 3, consider this, and also don't hesitate to talk with your coaches as well when you're noticing that you're overwhelmed, when you're noticing that you're bored, when you're noticing you're stuck on autopilot. So I just want to give that tool to you and leave that there. The last thing I'll say, and then we'll wrap up, is that I want to encourage you, because what if leadership is not all the negative experiences that we've had? It may not be perfectly aspirational because life has challenges, but what if leadership is lived contextually? What if it is always emerging and evolving? What if it is something that develops over time versus a trait that you have or you don't have? Externally, what if it's a process versus a thing? Because if it's a thing or a commodity, that means some people have it and some people don't. But as I said before, historically, leadership has always existed, which I think is why it's so hard to pin down and define in one way. What if leadership involves movement toward a common purpose and goal and emerges among people and across disciplines, and there's a level of interconnectedness? And what if you fill in the blank here with your name are a leader, and if so, who is or will be impacted by your embodied definition of leadership? Who is on the other side of your leadership? Who's actually experiencing you? So I just want to leave and end on that note with some food for thought. For action steps, meet with your coaches. If you remember, I'll probably send a reminder, bring your strengths cards, complete the areas of interest form in November. Living textbook, again, completely optional, is something that'll be compiled over time. And don't worry about number 4 right now, because I'm going to email our scholars that were absent. That is it for tonight. It's exactly 5:31. I apologize for going over one moment. Let me stop share. Thank y'all for being here. Thank you for staying with me. And I look forward to seeing you in November.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica.
You're welcome. Have a good one. All right. Have a good night, Romana, if you can hear me.